My name is Wanu Fazlina binti Wanzami and I'm from ECG263. I would like to explain how I carry out the mini project that I work on at my home. In this video, I demonstrate 5 different experiments which are moisture content, particle density, particle size, grading and texture, field density and permeability. For the first experiment is moisture content. The objective of this experiment is to determine the moisture content in the soil. For the first step, I drew a diagram on A4 paper of how I intended to begin the experiment. The apparatus that we use in this experiment are soil, plastic tray, scales, and aluminium foil. Next, we need to divide the soil into 3 parts. And record the mass of the soil and tray. Use the aluminium foil as the metal tray and label it. Next, we need to expose the soil into the direct sun for at least 1 day. The next day, take the sample and record the mass of the dry soil.
Drying method is widely used to determination of moisture content. The water has been removed from the heating process and has lost weight due to evaporation.
2, which is the particle density. The objective of the experiment is to determine the specific gravity of the soil using density bottle. For the apparatus that I use, first a plastic jar as a density bottle, distilled water, a vacuum, tissues and scale. For step number 1, first we need to sketch the diagram how I will conduct my experiment. Step number 2, weigh the plastic jar and record it. Step number 3, add 10 to 50 grams of soil into the jar and record. Step number 4, record the mass of plastic jar plus soil. Step number 5, add the distilled water for 3/4 of bottle and shake it. Next, open the cap and put it into the vacuum for at least 1 hour. Step number 7, add the distilled water until full and record the mass. For the last step, clean the jar and fulfill with distilled water and record the mass.
Specific gravity of soil is important because the specific gravity of soil and other construction material is a basic feature. For measuring particle density, basically we use a phylometer method.
The next experiment is particle size, grading and texture. The objective of the experiment is to determine the percentage of different grain size contained within a soil. For the apparatus that I use, first soil, different size of sieve and scale. Step number 1, sketch the diagram on how I conduct the experiment. Step number 2, start sieving and don't forget to arrange them in increasing sequence of sieve number. Step and at least shake for 10 minutes. Step number 3, record all the mass of soil retained for each sieve.
The particle size of dry, free-flowing material is determined by dry sieving. The particle in this sieve seek for the opening in the wire mesh by shaking or vibrating the sieve.
For the experiment number 4 is field density. The objective of the experiment is to determine the dry density of in situ soil. The apparatus that we use are the set of pouring cylinder, scale and sand. For the calibration of apparatus, record all the dimension of the calibrating container. Fill the sand pouring cylinder within about 10 mm to the top with sand. Next step, place the sand pouring cylinder on the calibrating container upright. Next, open the shutter and let the sand flow. Record the mass of sand pouring cylinder. On the glass plate, place the sand pouring cylinder and open the shutter and let the sand flow from cylinder until there is no movement. And lastly, weigh the mass. Repeat the step 4 to 6 to get the average. For the sand replacement method, first we need to clean the surface at the side. Next, place the metal tray on the surface. Next, using the central hole as a pattern, and the soil is excavated using scoop to required depth, and loose soil is collected in the metal tray. Step number 4, sand pouring cylinder is placed centrally over the excavated hole. Step number 5, record the mass of taking sample of soil from the site. And lastly, repeat the step 2 into step 6 3 times to get the average.
A field density test of soil is carried out in the field to see if the necessary compaction has been achieved. The second stage is to determine the soil density, and the third step is to determine the water content and dry density.
For the last experiment is permeability. The objective of the experiment is to determine the coefficient of permeability of fine-grained soil. The apparatus that I use: soil, basin, water, plastic bottle with hole at the bottom. For the first step, sketch the diagram on how I conduct the experiment. Second, put the soil into the bottle and compact it. Step 3, fill up the water in the bottle up to the top. Step 4, top up the water until it reaches to H1 mark. Step number 5, start observing the time for the water to reach from H1 to H2, H2 to H3, and H3 to H4.
The following heat permeability test involves the flow of water through a small soil sample linked to a standpipe that supplies the water heat, while also allowing the volume of water to pass through the sample to be measured.
In conclusion, solution, the outcome of each experiment is determined by the type of soil used and the method used to execute the experiment.